of Defense. The president expressing his concern about other nations as well. Former U.S. ambassador to the EU under President Obama, Anthony Gardner, is our next guest. He happens to be here in studio in New York. It's good to see you.
Good to be on the program.
Last time we spoke was during the Brexit breaking news. You were in London at the time. So that's one of the things that is out there. And now you add in kind of the uncertainty here in the U.S. Are you worried about the state of relations between the United States and the rest of the world, or should we be, and if so, why?
Well, I'm terribly worried about the state of relations between the U.S. and the rest of the world. You know, I've been worried for a year and a half that there's some serious geopolitical risks that the market has been underestimating.
Such as?
Well, trade is one thing. I've been saying for a year that the risks of an undermining of what's called the rules-based system, including the World Trade Organization, coming apart is being underestimated.
Underestimated? I would have thought, trade concerns are in this market. Every investor we talk to is concerned about them, certainly.
Now they are, but when I used to go around Europe and the rest of the world warning about what could happen, I basically got a yawn, a collective yawn. Now people are taking this seriously.
No, I get your point. People, in other words, at the beginning, everyone was assuming, and to their detriment, and a lot of people got caught on the wrong side of this trade in financial markets, that there would be more deals cut than there have been.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And what's concerning me is that the markets have been trading on short-term news and not distinguishing between the signal and the noise. For example, in Buenos Aires, when there was the meeting with Xi Jinping, they had made an announcement there's going to be a big, beautiful deal.
Yeah.
The next day, there was a total disagreement about what actually had been agreed. Markets go down. There was a meeting between Trump and Juncker, the president of the European Commission. They announced a big, beautiful deal at the Rose Garden, and the markets went up. The next weeks, there was confusion about actually what they had agreed. Markets go down. There's been very little effort to actually pierce through this fog.
Now, what about next year economically? We keep hearing about how last year's story when we were going into 2018 was about synchronized global growth, and now it's sort of the opposite. And maybe it hasn't quite gotten here in the U.S. There are concerns about growth slowing down, but Europe in many ways is really in trouble, right?
Europe is in trouble. Growth rates are going down, but one can't really talk about Europe, right, as a collective, because one really has to look at country by country. There's some countries that are actually performing quite well, not only Germany, by the way.
Germany slowed down, no?
Well, Germany slowed down, but it's still growing fairly robustly, and Scandinavia as well. UK has come down significantly. It used to be the best performer. Now it's among the worst performers, partly because of uncertainties of Brexit.
Yep.
So one has to really go at a country-by-country level.
Italy's got sort of a mess on its hands, right?
Well, that's nothing new, unfortunately. Italy's been living with uncertainty for a long time, but arguably worse than it has been for a while.
And France as well with the protests. So which area should we be if we're being most worried about something that might kind of come, not only affect us, but just affect global growth overall? Which part of Europe concerns you the most? Is it the UK because of Brexit?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about Brexit, certainly a hard no-deal Brexit, which, although is a low probability, is something that could happen. But even if it's not a no-deal hard Brexit, and I think there will be a deal, there will be uncertainty in the UK for a long time.
You think there'll be a deal?
I think there will be a deal. Well, there could be a vote, something that even a few months ago was considered to be improbable. It could actually happen. There could be her deal, Prime Minister May's deal, improved somewhat, with some trimmings, let's say, with regard to the new partnership that's been offered by the EU to the UK. But, there's going to be uncertainty in this market, and our businesses that I used to work with quite a lot when I was at Post in Brussels are making decisions, have been making decisions, and are slowly diversifying their risks when necessary.
What's an example of that? What are they doing?
Lots of banks, those who didn't have already subsidiaries in continental Europe or in Ireland, have established them so that they can continue to provide services after Brexit Day. But there are a lot of manufacturing businesses who are really exposed to this issue of tariffs, for products brought into the UK and products sold to the continent, are completely re-engineering their supply lines.
Any optimism that the trade story gets better next year? In other words, deals are starting to be cut, whether it's U.S. and EU, U.S. and China, or things get worse before they get better?
Well, I certainly hope they get better, and I hope there's a deal with China. But look, I am extremely pessimistic about this for a whole bunch of reasons. The EU has tabled a very detailed proposal about how to reform the World Trade Organization. There's been no engagement from this administration on that paper. And you know what? There's 90% overlap in our interests on what we should do to make that organization more effective. We should be working with the European Union rather than pointing a gun at its head. to address the issues of technology transfer you've been talking about in this program,
China,
and joint venture laws and so forth. And we're not doing that. I'll just give you two examples here of how this has real consequences for businesses.
Okay.
You know, we're joining Russia in a WTO case right now with regard to the measures that it took against Ukraine during the Crimea crisis, in which Russia says we have a national security exemption. And if we invoke that, judges cannot rule on the case. Saudi Arabia is the same thing in its efforts to embargo Qatar, right? Where we are taking the side of Saudi Arabia, saying you have the right to invoke national security, and there's no right for judges under trade rules to decide.
Yeah.
If that happens, we're in the law of the jungle.